I'd love to run our train right now, but we have one job left to do. Project 5. My Kingdom for a Hearse. I know I've already done 3 projects for Halloween this year, but we can't end off this train without an engine, can we? That would be so lame! Let's build something. Today, I've got a Cumberland Shops Type 36. It's a 3D printed conversion kit that steals the mechanism from a Bachmann USRA 060 in HO scale. It's an entirely fictional prototype, but it's quite convincing once assembled. I've been wanting an excuse to get one of these for quite some time, and while I would have loved to paint it for my own railroad, I just knew that the Heartless and Coin River would look best with a short tender engine at the helm of the train. As we get started here today, I'd like to shout out a community member because they kinda inspired the paint job today. I originally planned on just painting the engine in black and gray, dark colors for a spooky holiday. However, channel regular Celestial Caboose made a custom Heartless and Coin River texture pack for Derail Valley. And boy, oh boy, those engines were stunning to play with, especially in virtual reality. I realized that most steam engines are black, it would just be mundane, so I decided to take a page straight out of Celestial's book and painted the boiler in red instead. It's like blood, right? Very spooky. Don't get me wrong, I still used black and gray as secondary colors, but as you'll see in the final product, that red really works with this engine. However, red was not enough to satisfy my color crave, so I mixed up some cinnamon orange paint to highlight a couple of components. This was just like the Jimmy's. It's kind of this pumpkin-y orange, and it was made out of 1 part Ceramcoat Territorial Beige and 3 parts Americana Cadmium Orange. There was a weird fine line to balance here. I wanted to use the orange sparingly just to try and highlight certain elements to make them pop, but I also wanted to try and have the orange throughout the entirety of the engine to have this sort of continuous theme to it. It took some work to get it right, and I actually think at the time the color was a bit too sparse, but I didn't have all the details ready to paint just yet, so we'll be coming back to this and adding more orange later. I know I'm skipping and glossing over some of the details here, making the grab irons for instance, but I'm on a bit of a time crunch here. Fitting this into my regular schedule has been kind of difficult, and I only have 1 night to edit this down. Halloween is tomorrow. Maybe someday I should do a proper tutorial on assembling one of these Cumberland Shops 060s, especially considering the next point, but I'll do that when I have the time. Once the base of the engine was decorated, I wanted to see how it would all fit on a mechanism. If you wind up building one of these yourself, pro tip, the HO shell is held in place with a couple of screws, but there's also a friction fit on the bottom of the smoke box. The shell is very annoying to remove because of that, and you have to deal with it twice because you also have to worry about it when putting the new shell in place. With the boiler and cab successfully test fit, I focused on the non-powered wheels and the couplers. Now, the wheels were a little bit strange. The custom clips designed to hold them in place were supposed to be attached with the opening facing downwards. I expected the wheels to be held up by the bottom, but there was no bottom. I think you're supposed to put the wheels in first and then use some pieces of wire to permanently attach them? I wasn't entirely sure and actually never fully attached them. Another thing for the future tutorial, I guess. In contrast, the couplers were easy. All it took was a number 50 drill bit, some KD-148s, and a 256 screw. While there were a ton of details left to add at this point, I wanted to get the engine fully operational before adding on the last little bits, so I went for a quick test.
I forgot to plug in the track. No wonder the train isn't running. Now.
and everything worked fine. However, the engine was only DC at this point. Now, for some, that may be acceptable, especially for a side project such as this one, but I'm not some, I'm Stir. If it don't got a whistle, it ain't worth my time. Now, I didn't get many photos or videos of us wiring up the decoder. My father was having a lot of trouble doing it, and we didn't really have a setup near the soldering iron where we could do this at. I guess it's kind of nice for me right now as I'm editing this down, but it does remind me that I need a rig for that in the future. While I didn't record the wiring itself, I did record the test runs that we did as we were wiring in the decoder. There were a couple of hurdles we had to deal with that I'm kind of disappointed I didn't document better. The tender didn't really have the space for all the electronics. This is because the inside of the tender shell was pretty small, and because I wanted to stay alive of some kind. Now, the stay alive does take up more room, but the engine only has 6 wheels worth of pickup. When the engine runs over dirty track and the wheels aren't getting enough power, the stay alive will keep it alive for just a little bit longer so it can make it to some actual powered rails. And trust me, this matters. This engine stalled a good amount without a stay alive. The headlights were also weirdly stressful. I have to spoil something about next week's project. It's also a 3D printed shell for an engine conversion. If you want to see that video early, consider becoming a member. Anyways, when soldering in a headlight to that engine, we accidentally touched the shell with a soldering iron and melted a little bit of the print. I think I forgot to mention that issue in next week's video. Oops. Now, this is a bigger project than the one I'm going to be showcasing next week, but the tender had a weird angle of access for where I wanted to sneak in the headlight wires. To avoid soldering while in the shell, we instead soldered on a ton of excess wire to the headlight, strung it through the hole in the shell for the headlight wires, and then wired it to the decoder while the decoder was outside of the shell. Now, we did wind up having a ton of loose wire in the tender because of this, but we also didn't melt any of the resin. If it works, it works. As you might have noticed, I have been sneaking in some footage of adding detail parts as I ramble about our wiring struggles. I guess I should get back to the details though, huh? In fact, perfect timing. I think there's something important to note with this specific clip. If you use the headlight enclosures that the Cumberland Shops provides with their kits, be sure to paint their insides before you assemble them. The resin is not that great at keeping in all of the light, but an extra layer of paint goes a long way. For weathering, some brown pan pastels on the wheels, pistons, and lower tender helped to simulate dirt and grime from long-term use, and some gray pan pastels under the steam dome made it look like there was some steam leaks and added a little bit of weathering to the boiler. And with that, wait a minute, this is the last recording already? I know I'm trying to speedrun editing this down, and I'm glad I got footage of the touch-ups I did to the orange bits, but no footage of the tender steps? Those were orange. What about the tender lettering? Or the pair of toolboxes that I added? On one hand, thank you past self for giving me less to edit. On the other, I'm a moron. Moron or not, though. This is the one and only. The Heartless and Coin River's Old Trusty, sometimes known as the Spookerdoodle. Honestly, I'm a bit sad. I put a lot of world building into the Heartless and Coin River, but I didn't really get the time to build a proper model railroad to showcase all of that. Like, just for this train alone, I specifically chose the 262 wheel arrangement because the railroad is supposed to run trains so frequently that they don't have the time to turn around their only engine. The trailing truck is as much a pilot truck as the pilot truck is. The boxcar is for carrying express mail, the jimmies are for coal, and the tanker for oil to help heat the underworld. And of course, the combine is there for mail in the baggage compartment and for departing souls in the passenger section. With all that said, I would have loved to show you all a proper representation of the river and of the town of Heartless. But I just didn't have the time. It feels like I'm putting this project to rest before its time has come. Ironically fitting for the holiday. But I guess I shouldn't really look at it like that. In 1 month, I went from just a combination baggage coach to a whole train. I personally made a railroad logo just for YouTube thumbnails. We even got a silly undead mascot. I didn't use him, but we have him. Even if I didn't get the chance to act on all of my ideas this year, they're not going anywhere. I can always come back to them for Halloween 2025. And you bet you're family friendly. I plan to act on those ideas when the time comes. Seriously, I've got a whole micro layout to build. But at this point, that will have to wait for next year. For now, I'm actually really happy with what I have to show for you all. A surprise steam engine for one of my personal favorite holidays. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And since you've made it this far into this one, I may as well tease you with a hint of what's to come. Little Loop. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers, folks.